Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 26th of November 2012. For newcomers, as always, I suggest you make good use of the website cuttingthroughthematrix.com. There's hundreds and hundreds of audios for free download where I go through the system you're born into, the one that the media doesn't tell you about. And it pre-existed your parents as well and your grandparents too, because you're living through a big plan, a big script, you might say, with a timetable with it too. And you can go back 100 odd years or more and you can find lots of details if you go through the website, as I say, because I talk about the books written by lots of the big players down through the years who sat on international boards, and they published their own books on psychology, on sociology, and how they bring the world into this new global society. Vastly different world though. A world where they destroy all that was to bring in the new. Just like master builders, you see. You destroy what was there before. So they demolished basically over time the normal things that used to fight against them. This fascist kind of banker system. And that was the family units and the local natural communities, not the fake ones they're putting in today. And everything's been destroyed. They separated, they even created the word teenager, in fact, to separate the generations and taught them not to listen to the older people. This is all part of the communist strategy, which the big bankers financed as well. So you're living through the end times of this part of it as they go into the next phase for the great transition. And this is the century of change, as they call it. That's why Obama ran on change is good. He didn't tell the schmucks what kind of change he meant. And didn't bother to ask them either. So you're living through the big, massive changes on the go, where your living standard just goes down, really, really way down, and you will be part of a really crowded community as they get people off the rural areas, and corporate farms only will be allowed into the outer areas. And you will also have to basically live in a communal style society and austerity. It's very, very simple. And they're bringing out gross well-being. How's your well-being now? To do with happiness. If you're happy, and it doesn't matter how poor you are, you should just live on happiness and just cuddle trees and each other and all that kind of stuff. So remember too, you're the audience that bring me to you. You can keep me going by buying the books and discs at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And from the US to Canada, remember you can still use personal checks to Canada. You can still use international postal money orders from your post office to Canada. You can send cash or you can use PayPal. And across the world, Western Union and MoneyGram. And PayPal once again. And remember, straight donations are awfully, awfully welcome. Because I don't get cash from sponsors or advertisers or anything like that. So I don't sell anything else apart from my books at cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And as I say too, it's hard for most folk when you're born into a system where no one warns you about it at the very beginning. If anything, your parents indoctrinate you with their indoctrination of what they think is reality. And your school takes over. Television too, of course, is a big thing to do with it. And you're indoctrinated for the changes that you're going to expect to adjust yourself for throughout your own life. Each generation is minutely controlled. Actually, it's down to every 2 or 3 years they adjust it. It's that much. Right from kindergarten onwards for the changes that are all planned out there, you see. So there's nothing new under the sun except the fact that most folk don't know what's really happening. But the techniques are very, very old. They've worked before, and with neuroscientists and behaviorists and all kinds of ists and osts working with the big boys at the top, they really have got a complete grip on society of the world, and they're standardizing the society across the planet. If you notice, there's to be no more individual nations, and even cultures eventually all have to end up like the same type, standardized, stupefied, and dysfunctional. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, I'm back. We're cutting through the matrix, and of course the world goes on regardless of what happens, doesn't it? There's always big things going on. Big things that make you feel helpless because massive decisions are made that all affect you and every one of you, and yet you have no say in it at all. And it's always in faraway places where the internationalists meet, like this one here. It says 2012 United Nations climate talks in Doha, Qatar face multiple challenges. Well, did you get an invitation? I don't think anybody I knew got an invitation to go to that one and talk about the weather. And the weather, of course, is a big scam to get this new system in place to redistribute the wealth, they claim, and put it across the world. To the poorer countries with the big international corporations that work with the United Nations will all get grants to start up there, you see. That's what it's all about, folks. And remember, the Club of Rome actually came out with that whole idea because they were given the task of uniting the planet under some cause. And they looked at all wars and stuff and said, well, global warming, famine, and drought, etc. would fit the bill. And that's what they went with. So that was back in the 70s. After they decided before that it was going to be a coming ice age, and nature didn't go along with it very well. So they changed to global warming. But it's to redistribute the wealth of the people. And even one of the old politicians in Canada a few years back mentioned that too. It doesn't matter if all the science is fake. It'll help the poorer countries. Redistribution of wealth, a plank of the Communist Manifesto. And this one here says that as nearly 200 countries meet in oil and gas-rich Qatar for annual talks starting Monday on slowing global warming. That's really was a slowing global warming. What a farce, right? One of the main challenges will be raising climate aid, so it's all about money, you see, for poor countries at a time when budgets are strained by financial turmoil. And rich countries have delivered nearly $30 billion in grants and loans promised in 2009, but those commitments expire this year. And a green climate fund designed to channel up to $100 billion annually to poor countries has yet to begin operating. Well, you see, you run in a global fascist system. At the bottom, you run as a kind of communism, a collectivization, collective society at the bottom. But the ones at the top are the big fascistic ones that work with governments and their private corporations, you see. And what they do is they go into these countries that they've plundered for years. Sweatshops here, sweatshops there. When they get cheaper in one country, they move to the next one and just leave it in a mess. And they're doing nothing new about it. They're just getting more money from all of us to put their international corporation branches, little outlets, in these places too. For free, you see. For them, it's going to be for free. That's what it's all about, folks. And you wouldn't believe the thousands of organizations, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and working with the United Nations and all these big giant corporations, all working together on this, and all your governments too. Without your permission, of course. But this is the new path to austerity. The corporations have to get stinking rich as you throw your cash around the world and have nothing left for yourselves. And it says here, borrowing a buzzword from the US budget debate, Tim Gore of the British charity Oxfam said developing countries, including island nations for whom rising sea levels, every year they go out and they test them physically and there's no rising at all. It's only in computer models that are specially fixed and rigged, just like casino machines, to give them the answers they want. So what we need for those countries for the next 2 weeks are firm commitments from rich countries to keep giving money to help them to adapt to climate change. Well, just wear less clothing. That's what you do. Just peel off the heavy stuff. He told the Associated Press on Sunday. Creating a structure for climate financing has so far been one of the few tangible outcomes of the 2-decade-old UN climate talks, which have failed in their main purpose, reducing emissions of heat-trapping gases. Scientists say, some scientists are warming the planet. Melting the ice caps that suddenly get thick again every winter, glaciers and permafrost, shifting weather patterns, and raising sea levels that no one can actually notice in physical reality. The only binding treaty to limit such emissions, the Kyoto Protocol, expires this year, so agreeing on an extension is seen as the most urgent task by environment ministers. That's like, a minister used to be someone who's like a preacher, isn't it? But that's what they call politicians in the British Commonwealth countries. So you've got high priests of the environment, gods of the air and powers of the air. Oh, that's scary stuff. That's a lot of power, right? And they're meeting it in the Qatari capital, it says. However, only the European Union and a few other countries are willing to join a second commitment period with new emissions targets. Mind you, the European Union is it's always sinking. It's always in a crisis as it bails out one country after another, and they're all bailing each other out. Then the ones that were okay and didn't have to borrow money now have to borrow money to pay back all the loans they gave to bail out other countries. What a scam, eh? What a scam it all is. But it's wonderful. Brings in a new, tighter union, ends nations, as they say, and they'll all merge into one big, massive, conglomerate Soviet Union. Anyway, it says that the US rejected the Kyoto because it didn't cover rapidly growing economies such as China and India, because they're allowed to pollute as much as they want. Mind you, they're all Institute for International Affairs drafted all that up, CFR, comes from Foreign Relations. And actually had that the World Trade Organizations, which the CFR also created, and the United Nations, which they also created too. And it's all there. It belongs to the big banking boys, you see, these organizations. And they drafted all these treaties out and said they could pollute for 15 years and extend it for another 15 years and go on indefinitely, and wouldn't have to pay any taxes back on these things. As we still fund them, mind you. It says some hope for stronger commitments from the US delegates in Doha as work begins on drafting a new global treaty that would also apply to developing countries, including China, the world's top carbon emitter. The treaty is supposed to be adopted in 2015 and take effect 5 years later. Climate financing is a side issue, but a controversial one that often deepens the rich-poor divide that's hampered the United Nations climate talks since their launch in 1992. Critics of the United Nations process see the climate negotiations as a cover for attempts to redistribute wealth. Well, they've all said that's what it is. But it's not to the people. As I say, it's to the branches of the big international corporations that are in bed with the United Nations. You see? It says, Runge Merzer says the EU is prepared to continue supporting poor nations in converting to cleaner energy sources and adapting to a shifting climate, despite the debt crisis rolling Europe. But it couldn't promise the EU would present any new pledges in Doha, and said developing countries must present detailed bankable programs before they can expect any money. Sometimes developing countries seem to be saying, okay, give us a blank check, he told the AP. Well, actually, they do, because there's enough corrupt people everywhere on the planet who will do awfully well off it too, and sell their own people out on the process. Climate aid activists, because we have all these NGO activists, you see, all paid by the foundations, full-time armies of them, paid by these trillion-dollar foundations. They're the bankers' fronts, of course. And they're saying that many developing countries have already indicated what type of programs and projects need funding. They need financial and technical support from the EU and others, yet they continue to promise jam tomorrow, whilst millions suffer today, said Mina Raman of the Third World Network. They're all non-profit groups, but actually some of the salaries in these non-profit groups are up about $500,000 or $1 million for the top person. Not bad for a charity. Countries agreed in Copenhagen in 2009 to set up the Green Climate Fund with the aim of raising $100 billion annually by 2020. They also pledged to raise $30 billion in Fast Start climate financing by 2012. Well, that short-term goal has nearly been met by countries including the EU, Japan, Australia and the US. Oxfam estimates that only 1/3 of it was new money. The rest was previously pledged aid money repackaged as climate financing. Oxfam also found that more than half of the financing was in the form of loans rather than grants. See, they all want free grants, you see, like presents to start up the companies. And that financing levels are set to fall in 2013 as rich companies rein in aid budgets amid debt problems and financial instability. Well, no kidding. No kidding. But it's all a joke, you see, because it's a big alternate agenda going on under all these different covers. The new corporate world, remember, is a feudal system. And Quigley himself, from the Council on Foreign Relations, said so. He was their historian. They have their own version of history because they're behind most of the wars and all the changes that are happening right now. They can't tell you until it's all complete, and they'll tell you 50 years afterwards, and you won't really care about them. But they're behind it, and he said that the new feudal system, and in it he said the CEOs of international corporations will be the new feudal overlords. And speaking of feudal overlords, here's another website too. And it's quite interesting. It's from, you heard of this one. See, all the big wigs have gone into this, and there's even university courses teaching the sharks how to make more cash off every country to do with global responsibility and social responsibility for corporations. This one's called Corporate Social Responsibility Newswire. Sounds wonderfully. Corporate Social Responsibility Newswire. And it says, will Myanmar, that's old Burma, repeat the mistakes of global capitalism, or can it chart an approach better balanced with human and environmental needs, it says. And it says, Myanmar, formerly Burma, is filling my geopolitical CSR radar screen. President Obama just came back from the first ever trip by a U.S. head of state to the country, where he met with both Aung San Suu Kyi and Myanmar's reform-minded President Thein Sein. It says in September, in his debut United Nations speech, President Sein made a media splash talking about democratic reforms that, in his own words, says could never be reversed. He topped it by praising Aung San Suu Kyi, whom his country held under house arrest for more than a decade. But then he goes into, this author goes into meeting a particular writer who is all for this stuff, who pushes this kind of stuff, and probably is really in the know on who gets what grants, and probably quite a word in for you if you kick a few bucks back. It says this time it was a meeting where Joe Stiglitz encouraged the opportunity to get it right in Myanmar's emerging policy infrastructure. It says, he's got a new book out called The Price of Inequality. It sounds like it's really for all the people, isn't it? It's got to be for the people. But then he goes on, where's he meeting? He's meeting at the United Nations Millennium Hotel with the chair, John Ruggie, and the Institute for Human Rights and Business. Human Rights and Business Development. Back with more after this. Hi folks, I'm back. We're cutting through the matrix, talking about the cozy relationship between big corporations and the United Nations, and how it's all camouflaged under human rights and corporate responsibility and all that kind of stuff, as they put their hands out for your cash for their big corporations to go into third world countries. It doesn't cost them a penny at the end of it. And of course they'll be watching that climate conference too, the United Nations, very, very carefully, because they'll be waiting to see what grants are going to get dished out for these countries, this very country too, like Burma. Anyway, this author's talking about meeting the Human Rights and Business Group at the United Nations Millennium Hotel. And they have a little 11 there, you see. And it says, who else was there? It says, when I asked Joe to describe the hallmarks of socially responsible companies, listen to this, he pointed to several of his fellow panelists, who included representatives from General Electric and Coca-Cola, and what they just described they're currently doing in Myanmar. What's the surprise? They're being very careful, it says. Well, what they mean by that, they're waiting to see what the cash grants are going to come out of this meeting at Qatar. That's what it is. It doesn't say that's here, but that's what it is. And it says here, that's all mentioned too, that transnationals can influence the ethics and standards of a country, even if, as it gestates and emerges from the cocoon, it says here. That's an actual link they put it to from their own site, this corporations for social responsibility, the guys with their hands out. It's a great business today. You can't lose. It's like all the money gets thrown into solar. Billions of dollars, then they just say, oh, we're bankrupt, and that's it, and all of that money disappears. They're given all that cash from the US tax purse. This is the real cons of the world that you're living in. This is the greatest thing ever for big corporations. This globalization and global warming. Why do you think they're there at all the meetings? Also, as we go down the hill, basically, into oblivion regarding culture and common sense and even basic ethics and morality and so on, which was all decided a long time ago to utterly, and I mentioned it before from people like Theo Adorno, who talks about creating a culture. He was brought in actually to America and Britain to create the Western culture, and he actually said, we'll break it right down, destroy the family unit, having massive promiscuity, all that kind of stuff, right down to necrophilia eventually. It says, and even beyond that, but to make sure that nothing of the old exists. And then they bring in this new system where it's really government training you from birth to death, like a robot. Anyway, it's all done again through predictive programming. The greatest predictive programming techniques are comedies. That's how it all starts off in comedies. Things that you think are, oh my God, that's disgusting, are put out in comedies. And you laugh at them. Once you laugh at them, you're a goner. Because eventually you get used to the idea. And they're bringing all the moral arguments about it too. And you sit there and you don't know it. You're getting guided to the conclusion. Their conclusion, you see. It's done by experts, especially the BBC. It's got panelists that bring panelists for these things in, like teams of psychiatrists, psychologists, and all the rest of it, social workers. They bring them in. Coronation Street had a massive list of them to make sure they get it right, because they're going to brainwash you, and that's a Tavistock technique. That's where it first started off for the BBC in Tavistock. All these techniques, how to influence mass audiences. Anyway, it says, the BBC 3 announces assisted suicide sitcom, it says. It's called Way to Go. And the 6-part sitcom will feature the in-betweeners, and it tells you who these characters are. The comedy is based around brothers Scott and Joey and their friend Kozo. After Scott is moved by a terminally ill neighbour's request to die, and at the same time faced with a predatory female employer, the split from his girlfriend, a desperate life or death need for cash to pay off his brother Joey's gambling debts, he and his best mates Kozo stumble towards what they think is their only solution, an assisted suicide machine, which they'll have to keep very quiet and secretive about. But they'll basically rent it out, basically, I suppose. So they give you all the wee dramas, and you'll laugh along the ways, and you'll get sucked into it, and you're getting programmed, and you don't even know it. That's the first thing, is that comedy is always the way they start it off. It's also how they update everything that's abhorrent to you, and becomes normalized eventually. And you'll all fall for it, because you'll like it, you see. If you watch it, that is, for the ones that do. Because it's put together by experts. People who understand your mind better than you'll ever know. Or yourself, that is, for that matter. And also, in Australia, there's been so much hype about the Prime Minister there, Gillard, because she was heavily involved, it seems, in a lot of scams way back to do with a big union, and money was going missing and all that. Some of it mentioned from articles last week was going into her personal accounts and stuff like that, it seems. And anyway, there's different witnesses trying to come forward. Many have been threatened by Gillard and with government agents. Others have been bought off. But it says Gillard, as Prime Minister, was hounded by Blewett, this other guy, Blewett his name is, for money he still owed, about $12,000. Gillard responded with the threat, disappear or I'll get the AFP on you. Blewett promptly disappeared, but now he's back with hot blood and a thirst for vengeance, it says. One of the many questions the Pickering Post has broached with Gillard is, why does Ralph Blewett consider it's you who should redress the claimed debt, and why did you react in such a way? So this goes through what happens, and how all the cover-ups which has been done by the government to try and make these people all just go away or fade away or get lost, and some really nasty threats and so on. Right down to all the media that tries to report on it. They've even changed the laws on reporting, all because of this. That's the power of those at the top, or those behind the ones at the top. Back with more after this.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix and just looking at the farce of the world, because they really treat us like children, don't they? All the articles you see, it's like, I read a story today too, it says, click here for a fun article. This is from a major website, mainstream. A fun article on climate change. Fun, you know. So anyway, it's interesting about the central banking system. Carol Quigley went through it and said these central banking systems are privately owned, really, come under an umbrella. They're all connected together. They're under an umbrella of the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland. And eventually, of course, they amalgamate even these central banks down the road as they amalgamate countries into continents, and so, like Europe and North America and South America too, the way it's going. But this was planned 100 years ago. This whole movement towards the three main trading blocks of the world. And it started off and written about by those who were involved in creating it at the Royal Institute for International Affairs. You can go into the books they put out themselves, and they tell you they planned the whole future for themselves, of course, and the kind of world they bring in and how they change society on the way. But in central banking, it's interesting is they can move guys from one country, they're heads of banks, into another country to run their banking system. And it says here that Mark Carney of Canada has been named as the new governor of the Bank of England by Chancellor George Osborne. Mr. Carney, the governor of the Canadian Central Bank, will serve for 5 years and will hold new regulatory powers over the banks. He was a surprise choice for the head of the UK's central bank and had previously ruled himself out. Well, they told us 6 months ago in Canada that pretty well he was head of the running for it in Canada. The post is seen as one of the most important positions in the stewardship of the UK economy. What really is the central banking got to do? The people are the economy. Small business used to be the economy. Not the guys. But it's true, these guys at the top are the guys who run and own governments. Because governments must go with them cap in hand every year, and sometimes quite a few times a year, to ask for more cash. Anyway, the current governor, Sir Mervyn King, steps down from his post next June, and Sir Mervyn said Mr. Carney represented a new generation of leadership for the Bank of England. And it's true, because he, again, is Goldman Sachs. Carney was trained by Goldman Sachs, as pretty well everybody across the world is now, if you're anybody at all. You have to belong to that one group. This is what you get in democracies. Now, climate ugliness goes nuclear, it says, and this is from What's Up With That. It says, climate skeptics are equated to pedophiles. And Robin Williams, ABC, Time to Protest, it says, the comments by Williams are far worse than what Alan Jones said in October that created a national storm. And it says, this morning on the Science Show, Robin Williams equates skeptics to pedophiles, people pushing asbestos and drug pushers. See, when they have nothing to fight back with facts, they always smear you. This is the old commie tactic, actually. But it's the same people who are running the other side for it, for the big corporations, for those who haven't quite clued in on how it really works. Same people. Williams starts the show by framing Republicans and skeptics as liars. And it says new scientists complain about the gross distortions and barefaced lying politicians come out with. He goes on to make the most blatant, baseless and outrageous insults by equating skeptics to people who promote paedophilia, asbestos and drugs. So I'll put that up tonight as well for those who care to go through it. But it won't matter. It won't matter, as I say, if the great God himself comes down, as I say, and says it's all nonsense. They'd have to eliminate him, because this is the plan. If these big boys at the top that plan the world and the future of the world get together, they never change their plans. It doesn't matter how ridiculous a thing will sound at the beginning. Like forcing well-being, that idea of well-being onto you as they make you poor. It sounds crazy, but they're doing it all over the world. They are doing it. They've got all and you're paying for it all, by the way, through your tax money, as they give them to NGO groups that come around your areas and question you on your well-being and show you ways to be happier with the circumstances of poverty you're living in. And even train you to get ready for the worst situation you're going to be in when they're finished plundering you. And here's an article too in Democracy, right? You see, we're going so far into what people think is the left, actually, because they use the left and the right. It's all one. It's all one. The dialectic can only work through oppositions. That's what dialectic is. You get an opposition to what is staid and standard. And then you get the conflict going, and out of it you get the synthesis. And out of that, you guide it to the synthesis, in fact, which is what you wanted in the first place. But if you didn't have an antagonist to begin with, an opposition of any kind, nothing would happen. You'd probably stay pretty healthy, and you'd live longer, you'd be happier, you wouldn't have all these international worries about nonsense and climate change and being plundered by banks to bail out Europe and plundered by your governments to throw money across the planet to third world countries that goes to corporations. Anyway, Council defends taking the foster children away from United Kingdom Independence Party members. That's how bad it's got. Didn't even do this in the Soviet Union. So a council has refused to back down over its decision to remove 3 children from their foster parents because their membership of the UK Independence Party meant that they supported racist policies. That's how far it's gone, The husband and wife who've been fostering for nearly 7 years said they were made to feel like criminals when a social worker told them their views on immigration made them unsuitable carers. The decision by Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council has provoked a widespread criticism, with campaigners representing foster parents describing the decision as ridiculous and warning that it could deter other prospective foster parents from volunteering. But Joyce Thacker, the council's director of Children and Young People's Services, remember what Lenin said? He says they'll all start up as voluntary agencies, all these things in the West. Even police services were police services. And then he says they'll end up being authorities over the people. Just like health service turns into health authorities. It's all planned that way. He knew. Anyway, it says, this is what the woman says today, said that the 3 ethnic minority children had been placed with the couple as an emergency and the arrangement was never going to be long term. She told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "We always try to place children in a sensible cultural placement. These children are not UK children and we were not aware of the foster parents having strong political views." What's strong political views? I think, aren't they all strong political views in all parties? There are some strong views in the UKIP party, and we have to think of the future of the children, she said. Also, the facts of the matter is that we have to look at the children's culture and ethnic needs. The children have been in care proceedings before, and the judge has previously criticised us for not looking after the children's culture and ethnic needs, and we have to really take that into consideration with the placement that we're in. As for what the specific problem was with the couple being UKIP members, Mrs. Thacker told BBC, "We have to think about the clear statements on ending multiculturalism, for example. These children are from EU migrant backgrounds, and UKIP has very clear statements on ending multiculturalism, not having that going forward, and I have to think about how sensitive I am being to those children." She said that there was no issue about the quality of care the couple provided, and said she would cooperate with any investigation. So this is where you got today, where you're really awfully careful to disrage you, and that's it, because you actually vote for a particular party. Interesting too, you think about all those years you had a British Communist Party, you could vote for them. The Communists vowed to overthrow all existing forms of governments. All of them. And they all had an example of the Soviet system when the Bolsheviks took over. Millions and millions were slaughtered. But they were allowed to vote. That was okay. And by the way, you'll never see Hollywood putting out an anti-communist movie. Doesn't happen. It's always anti-Hitler. But communism, for some reason, they killed millions and millions. Communism somehow was okay. End of the doctor's surgery. General practitioner visits are to be replaced by Skype consultations in a bid to save the National Health Service £3 billion. Remember what I've said before, that it was the Rand Corporation that was consulted and paid to do an investigation into what kind of system Obamacare should have, and they gave the report to Obama. And I have it here from the Rand Corporation. They said they were copying Britain. So now you know what your Obama phone is for. You ain't going to see a doctor, you can just phone them, I guess, and you get a little picture. You probably, it'll be like Idiocracy, where you have to point to the knee or something, and it's all red looking, sharp pain, things like that. It doesn't matter. See, we're all at the bottom. We're just cattle at the bottom. This is technological revolution. Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt believes plans to conduct doctors' appointments via Skype or over the phone will save the National Health Service £3 billion. And it says plans to replace face-to-face doctors of surgery appointments with treatment over the phone or via computer weblink will put lives at risk, ministers and campaigners have warned. The new system of virtual clinics favoured by Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt could spell the end of traditional doctors' surgeries, with appointments conducted on iPads and Skype and test results delivered by text messages. Well, they already have all your medical history now. There's no such thing as privacy. The Sunday Express reported that NHS bosses are importing the idea from India and so you're now equated with India, and believes the changes would cut £2.9 billion almost immediately, a good chunk of the £20 billion of the National Health Service must save to fill its funding gap. The cons that they've played with the National Health Service has just been astounding over the years. Astounding, the cons. It says, however, critics say the plans would create a two-tier health system where those who are less technologically able, particularly elderly, will be left behind and the trust between doctor and patient eroded. Don't worry, they'll come round with a van and they'll give you the euthanasia pill after they've watched that comedy I was talking about. The ideas were outlined by Health Minister Dan Poulter last week and are contained in the Department of Health report called Digital First. It was supplying community nurses with iPads in rural areas and making more use of Skype video calling between GPs and patients. Health assessments would be completed online and augmented with video calls. So they've got mobile phone apps. No, it's going to make all these darned machines essential with anybody who's got any medical problems at all. And that's always been the plan, of course, too. Also, the US Navy apparently has already got some of this virtual doctors applications working, and they're expanding it. Apparently, I'll put one up too. And this article is quite amazing. You know, people have nothing left as far as testosterone goes, I think. And I really mean that too. They're becoming sterile, and they've definitely had an amazing amount of inoculations that have been rather nasty for their brains. And after maybe watching so much television, that's a science in itself to brainwash you. It's been awfully effective. But they never stand up together and say that's enough. And kick all the control freaks that are multiplying like cancerous tumors out of office. It says, hard up father who moved his family into caravans, that's like a little trailer, because they couldn't afford their rent, is jailed after he refused to remove them from a picturesque village. So, he's a prick, it says, Prike, 47, and his wife Gwen, 48, moved into tents on their field in the picturesque village of Dedham, Essex, when their business went bust. The couple and their 3 teenage children turned to the council for help, but said they were only offered a flat that was too small, apartment too small. So they pitched a campsite in a field that has been in their family for 300 years. But Colchester Borough Council say they cannot stay there without planning permission, which they cannot get, meaning they're not going to give it to them. Mr. Prike has been jailed for 4 months after refusing to move. Huh? So, it says, but despite the fact that the 2-acre plot has been in their family for 300 years, the council chiefs told them they would still need planning permission even to set up a camp, even put a tent up. The couple and the 3 children turned to the council for help and so on. But as I say, they were just offered a tiny little apartment that they couldn't all fit in. So that's where it goes. That's Great Britain for you. It's great for some, but for most it's not so great after all. And it just shows you that down the tubes. Where's all the people getting around them and just storming these control freaks that sit in their offices with their big, fat fingers and their fat chins and multiple chins. And it's like, it's worse beyond this. We are super Soviet now, you understand. The New World Order is way beyond what the Soviets planned. We are the next stage, the more perfected form of the Soviet system. The Soviet system was supposed to go into a different system through different stages. And eventually, the dictatorship was only to last for about 70 years, which it did, by the way. And then it would merge with the West. It would be neither quite capitalist nor communist. It would be a form of socialism. Socialism is fascism. Corporations working with their governments and masses of government agencies monitoring every single one of you, including your children, and all the experts coming in and say, well, your child needs special drugs, or your child is suffering from this, that, or the other. We have to take care of them. Or you voted for the wrong party, where you take the children away. It's all here, folks. And I'm telling you, if you don't stop it now, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I really mean that. I really, really mean that. That's the history. That's history. You're doomed to repeat it if you don't know it. And we're at the stage now where you get fired if you don't take the flu shots. Tri-Health fires 150 employees for not taking their flu shots. and it says the Tri-Health offered all of its 10,800 employees free flu shots. Employees had a month to get the shot. The deadline was November 16th. Employees who didn't get the shot were terminated Wednesday, a company spokesperson said. It says employees who are terminated can appeal to be reinstated after receiving the shot. So you still have to get it, or they might take you in then if you're on your knees. Yeah. So that's what it's coming to. This is the free world that you're living in today. As corporations like those who create vaccines are lobbying governments all the time to get 10-year contracts for flu shots. Do you imagine what kind of business, if you're a small business, any kind of business, guaranteed an income for 10 years off just one sale? Massive, just guaranteed. And most of the cash paid up front. And the government will make sure that everybody must use your products. Oh yeah, we'll tell them they'll all got to get the shot. There's freedom, eh? There's freedom. Now, Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his government have intervened to pressure the Palestinian Authority to drop its bid for upgraded status at the United Nations. Can you believe that? Lovely little Canada under pristine snow. Always standing up for the little guy. At least in propaganda campaigns, it seems like that. And they go forward and intervene to put pressure the Palestinian Authority to stop trying to get United Nations status. And it says, further cementing Canada's transition into one of Israel's firmest allies. Back with more after this. Hi folks, I'm back cutting through the matrix, and there's a caller there, Aaron from Nevada, on the line. Are you still there, Aaron?
Yes, Alan. All we need is closer ties. Everything will be okay. I was just wondering if you've been following this matter with Stratfor. Last time I called, I mentioned how certain radio show hosts are bringing on ex-CIA present star members, and that was okay. They have good things to say. Now, that same broadcaster who takes all the money in the alternative media has hired a former intern that worked Stratfor for over a year. And of course, if you look into Stratfor, there's a federal case going on in which Stratfor lost, because of a hack on their computers, 50,000 credit card numbers. How does an intelligence broker like Stratfor amass 50,000 card numbers in the first place? That's a good question. I don't know. And they also lost 5 million of their emails, which were sent to WikiLeaks.
That's right.
That was last year. And guess what? Guess who's hired a former employee over there? So really, as far as I'm concerned, the alternative media has been compromised because the person who gets all the attention and money is now people from maybe he'll just be hiring people straight out of this bar now. And that will be the alternative media, the CR.
Well, here's something, I've said this so many times, and I don't know how many folk ever remember it at all, if they even do. But I went through the history of a Patriot radio for the US. It was in an article, it's a half page in the Toronto Star quite a few years back. And initially, Patriot Radio was started up with funding from the CIA to fight communism propaganda, or communist propaganda. And at that time, they used Christian front groups to use them. And I've often said that, everything in the world, all information is controlled. And anyone who starts up something genuine is infiltrated so fast. I mean, even Lord Monckton went to Greenpeace. He helped start that thing up. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, the head guy left because it's already infiltrated. It was so quick to do. And it's the same with all kind of things that could wake up people's minds. You expect to be infiltrated. But I always tell people to think for themselves if possible. And it doesn't matter what you're hearing, what's coming out there too. You've got to look at things very, very closely. And of course you're going to have either attempts at infiltration, into your agency, no matter how you start off. And maybe there are people out there that are started off in the very first place by agencies themselves. I mean, we're in a real quagmire of data and organizations, and even before I get here sent to me from different organizations, I have to really check a lot of them out and find out exactly who they are. And it shocks me sometimes to find out where the sources are coming from. So it's a propaganda war for sure. But I do know that Stratfor, they've also been in the news for the big system they're bringing out, nationwide, maybe even worldwide, to do with data collection and everybody. They're a big player in that. So understand your concern for sure. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
And from Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. So may your God or your gods go with you.